From the Oklahoman newsroom, this is an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here with OSU beat writer Scott Wright. Scott, our football preview section hits newsstands and/or your driveway on Sunday. This Sunday, we'll have a lot of history, looking back at this being the 150th anniversary of college football. We've already rolled out our 150 best Cowboys of all time, and a current guy that's already made that list is Tylan Wallace. He's at 93 right now, the wide receiver about ready for his junior year. He's got a chance to move up. I guess how much remains to be seen, but how did he make his way already on this list in your mind to be considered already one of the best Cowboys of all time?
Well, obviously the sophomore year that he had was ridiculously impressive. To come in as a virtual unknown who played in a few games as a true freshman, and then to explode onto the scene as a sophomore. And really, he was kind of the third guy or even fourth guy. When you look at the beginning of that year, you had Tyron Johnson, who was expected to be the guy who would have the breakout year. Dylan Stoner was already established. Jalen McCleskey was already established. Wallace was kind of the fourth guy in that rotation that you were looking at to be a supplemental piece in that offense. And then all of a sudden, he becomes the star and just runs away from everybody. Finalist for the Biletnikoff, one of the best seasons that a sophomore has had at Oklahoma State. You look at his track record compared to where James Washington was as a sophomore, where Rashawn Woods was as a sophomore, and he's right there, if not ahead of some of those guys. Obviously, Justin Blackman won the Biletnikoff as a sophomore, had an outstanding season, but you look at those top guys, he's right there with all of them as a sophomore.
You mentioned that he really started his season a year ago as maybe that fourth guy in public perception, but you've talked to Cowboy coaches who said, you know what, we knew early on that this guy was special, even to the point of how much he played as a freshman, which when you look at who they had then, most people would say, how did he even crack the lineup at any point in the year?
Yeah, absolutely. At outside receiver that season, when he was a true freshman, you had James Washington and Marcel Aitman, your starters. You had Chris Lacey and Tyron Johnson as the number two guys at each outside spot. There was absolutely no reason for Tyron Johnson to play that year. He played a lot of special teams, got in when they had opportunities. Mike Gundy referenced the one-handed catch that he made at Pittsburgh, and it was a blowout game. Taylor Cornelius had already replaced Mason Rudolph that day, but an incredible play that he made that really stuck with a lot of people. But he had done a lot of stuff before that to make them think that he needed to play. He showed them in August that he needed to be on the field. He needed to get that feel for game speed because they knew what he could be. They saw him coming. They saw his breakout coming long before anybody else did.
You know, as you think about where Tylan Wallace could potentially rise to in the history of Oklahoma State football, you know, you've mentioned some of the greats. Blackman, Hartley Dykes is out there as well at the receiver position. Obviously, James Washington. Just so many guys that you can point to already with over 1,500 yards in his career. What, in your mind, would Tylan Wallace have to do to maybe hop up into that conversation? I mean, when you look at all Cowboys of all time, those names I mentioned before are like top 20 players all time. What would Tylan Wallace have to do to really accelerate his spot in those all-time rankings in your mind?
You know, staying on pace from a year ago, doing more of what he did. You know, a Biletnikoff award certainly isn't going to hurt. All-American honors are going to be a type of thing that could really boost his career. One big factor in this: does he come back after this season? Yeah. He's eligible to go to the NFL draft after this year. If he has another great year and starts getting that kind of recognition, it could be time for him to move to the next level. You never know what his preference is going to be. He might be a guy that wants to be sticking around Oklahoma State for a fourth year, hang around with his brother for one more season. So you never know what a guy is going to feel about that type of thing, but that will dictate, you know, what he can achieve as a Cowboy. But if he keeps playing the way that he has, he's a very grounded individual, cut a lot out of the same mold as James Washington mentally in his approach to the game, and that was what really helped James Washington to accomplish a lot of the things that he did and stick through 4 years and win a Biletnikoff. So those are some of the things that are really going to stick out and help him to continue climbing that 150 list.
You know, it's interesting too when you look at those receivers that are already higher on the list. most of them played at least 2 years with a really good quarterback.
Yeah.
Tylan Wallace, different quarterback each year. It's going to be interesting to see as he breaks in another new quarterback this year. We know it's going to be somebody different, but who that is and how does he work with either Drew Brown or Spencer Sanders? How does that evolve? Another interesting aspect of his junior year at Oklahoma State. We'll be chronicling all that, obviously. So be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at Oklahoman.com and every day in the Oklahoman.